Our rivers and our streams are too important to give away to private corporations.
We have the cheapest electricity in the world because of public energy. But that soon is going to be lost as we turn to more private sources of electricity.
It's the biggest heist of public resources in Canadian history and an enormous threat to the future of British Columbia's environment, economy, and society. But up until now, the public has been kept in the dark. Over the past several years, the provincial government has been quietly giving away potentially permanent rights to hundreds of BC's rivers to some of the world's biggest corporations. At the same time, it has put BC's envied public utility in grave danger by forcing it to buy all its new power from these private river operations at up to 20 times the price it makes its own power for.
The BC Energy Plan takes every single watershed in British Columbia that can make power and puts it in a private hand. And the population is unaware of that. I think the word is malfeasance.
It is essentially privatization by stealth by the government.
But the media and citizens are taking notice now, fortunately in time to stop the vast majority of these disastrous projects and dramatic changes to BC's energy system. But the time to act is now, given the inevitable consequences if this program goes forward. Much higher power costs to consumers, the depletion of an invaluable public asset, and devastation to BC's natural environment.
The big losers here are the public in British Columbia because they're the ones that are going to pay the long-term costs, both in economic, environmental, and social costs.
As for the value of our hydro resources, they'll effectively be lost.
And when they say that these small projects are green or balanced in nature, they're just simply lying.
I had read all the material and I understood Run of the River very well. But when I actually got a chance to go out and view the Ashley project myself, I was stunned.
When you have that impact and you magnify it and you multiply it 500 times, you have a really serious problem.
Fears began to rise over construction giant Ledcor's private power project on the Ashley River, a world-renowned kayaking and fishing destination. This is Brian Smith, Squamish filmmaker and kayaking enthusiast. Smith recently completed a documentary on the devastating impacts by Ledcor's project on his beloved Ashley and the disturbingly undemocratic process that led to its quote-unquote approval. After hearing from a long list of concerned residents and experts through its public consultation process, the Squamish and Lillooet Regional District voted 8-1 against zoning approval for the project. And that's where the democracy ended.
The local government held several public hearings. They listened to the people. They said no to the project. And then the government sort of backhandedly approved the project through Bill 30.
Bill 30, also known as the Ashley Bill, stripped local municipalities of their zoning authority over private river power projects, leaving BC's communities without a voice in this process.
They essentially just changed the rules and took away their authority to protect their community's interests.
With the local government out of the way, in late 2006, Ledcor rolled in, to the public's dismay, installing security to control access, clear-cutting trees, and boring a massive hole through the side of Ashley Mountain to divert 92% of the river's flow.
We drive up to the Ashley and there's a major road going through and there's logging everywhere and there's transmission lines everywhere. And they said, "Where's your ID?" And we're saying, well, aren't we on a public road?
We've told you not to wander around in our construction areas.
And we moved out.
But we've had to inform you repeatedly. That's where we're getting into an issue where
Is this a public road?
Just clear out of the way and let us go.
It's a public road. I'd like you to move your truck and allow us to go up the road. Otherwise, I'd like to know who you are. I'll take it back to the minister. I was taken aback. It was much bigger than I had ever expected it to be. The construction, the development, the degradation of the environment around the river, all of those things, the majesty of the river itself, watching it run. It's a phenomenal river, the Ashley.
It is out of control, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now.
More than 30 similar projects are already underway or nearing completion, with hundreds more waiting in the wings. We took a trip to this dock in North Vancouver to get a look at the piles of water pipe arriving here from around the world. Much of this pipe will likely end up in BC's rivers for private power projects. This staggering volume moves through here on a regular basis, giving a sense of the scale of projects like the 120 megawatt behemoth at East Toba, or the 8 planned projects totaling 180 megawatts in the single watershed of the Upper Pitt River, the latest flashpoint for the growing coalition to stop private power in BC.
The Upper Pitt River is a really special place. It has an amazing amount of wildlife. You have grizzly bears, you have wolves, you have Roosevelt elk. But what it's really known for is its wild salmon population.
There you have 8 potential turbines to be put in place. It's a massive project. You'll be running transmission lines through the middle of a provincial park.
In addition to its severe environmental consequences, the BC Energy Plan poses a grave economic threat to the province, with business fundamentals that would make sense only to those private companies on the other end of these lucrative, secure deals. One of the largest and greenest public hydro utilities in the world today, BC Hydro has long been a model for affordable, sustainable electricity. BC Hydro got its start in the 1950s and 60s when Premier W.A.C. Bennett bought out several private power companies, including BC Electric Company, and committed significant public funds to build one of the world's finest, most valuable public utilities. By selecting a few strategic locations on the Peace and Columbia rivers to dam, BC is now able to create the cheapest power in the world at a raw cost of about $5 a megawatt hour, a standard unit of measurement for electricity. BC Hydro sells power to large industry at a paltry $35 a megawatt hour, providing a competitive advantage to BC businesses and major economic stimulus and job creation throughout the province. Residential consumers pay about $65 a megawatt hour, among the cheapest rates in Canada, and 5 times less than what consumers in California pay. The balance pays for the operation of the system and still allows for a healthy profit that flows back into the province for healthcare, education, and other vital public services.
So we're paying essentially for the operation and maintenance of the system. The fuel doesn't cost us a dime. It's an absolutely perfect system.
But the BC Energy Plan changed all that. Made official by the provincial government in 2003, this new policy forbade BC Hydro from creating any new power of its own, forcing it instead to buy power from private river operations at much higher rates.
I call it a buy high, sell low strategy.
Under this new system, BC Hydro has already signed $30 billion worth of purchase agreements at up to $87 a megawatt hour, plus the hefty price tag on new transmission systems for private power, which brings the real cost to BC Hydro to over $100 a megawatt hour as compared with the approximately $5 a megawatt hour it makes its own power for now. In fact, the government recently announced $5.1 billion in public spending to upgrade BC's transmission grid. Just last year, the government extended the special $35 rate to industry indefinitely, ensuring its support for the BC Energy Plan. And BC Hydro sells electricity to its neighbors on what is called the spot market, which is currently at about $50 a megawatt hour. As illogical as this may seem to the consumer, BC Hydro is actually committed to a perpetual loss in both industrial and export sales, since the cost of new private power is a lot higher than the sale prices it's locked into in these markets, which leaves the public with the enormous financial burden of supporting the system through much higher consumer rates.
Rates are going to go up because costs are going to go up. As BC Hydro buys more and more of these high-cost resources, more than necessary, loses money on the buying of resources that's sold at a loss in export markets.
And left unchecked, this never-ending debt cycle will bankrupt BC's public utility in the future, leaving its existing assets vulnerable to be taken over by private interests. This process clearly threatens BC's energy security.
They're extraordinarily valuable assets. They were built at some cost, both to the environment and at the time in dollar terms. They'll effectively be lost.
Another key change to BC Hydro came through a secretive deal which came into effect in 2003 that saw 1,500 hydro employees shunted to a brand new BC subsidiary of multinational consulting giant Accenture. Formed from the ashes of Anderson Consulting, Accenture officially split from Arthur Andersen in 1999, just prior to its parent company's spectacular collapse with Enron in the largest corporate fraud case in U.S. history. The jobs in question include customer care and call center operations, accounting, IT services, and other important functions within BC Hydro. The Canadian Office and Professional Employees Union, who represents the affected workers, was neither consulted nor informed of the changes until they were made official, and has been kept in the dark on the particulars of the deal ever since.
It was done by the provincial government, but not through the legislature. Members of the opposition haven't seen it. I suspect many members of sitting MLAs haven't seen it. It is protected and shrouded in secrecy, despite the fact that it's 100% funded by taxpayers' money.
With a private corporation controlling 1/3 of BC Hydro's jobs and key strategic operations from within, with little to none of the transparency expected of a crown corporation, the drive to privatize is operating on multiple fronts.
I think our role here is a broader role than just speaking for our members. We're speaking for the communities that our members and their families live in. Our goal is to talk to 1 million British Columbians before the next provincial election and get them engaged at some level.
The major push for privatization began in 2001 on the heels of Gordon Campbell's campaign promise to keep public the jewel of BC's crown corporations. The first shot came in the form of a position paper submitted by Alcan, now in the hands of foreign mining titan Rio Tinto, to Campbell's newly minted Energy Policy Review Task Force. The fingerprints of Alcan and other similarly minded corporations and industry lobbies are all over the task force's final recommendations, which would go on to become the BC Energy Plan. The report is a lobbyist's dream, a perfect reflection of private interests to take control of BC's rivers and public energy assets while securing guaranteed private wealth, all disguised as good public policy. But some of the shocking recommendations highlighted in the report are surprisingly brazen and clearly show the underpinnings of a massive industry-led transformation of BC energy policy, which utterly dismisses the public's interests. Alcan, who in 1950 was given access to the Nechako River in northwestern BC to produce power to create aluminum jobs, now wanted a free market approach to energy and the right to break its commitments and reap huge profits from power sales. The Alcan-led BC Energy Plan, which became official in 2003, opened the floodgates to a host of other private power companies. Hundreds of private power licenses were soon handed out, and the first companies out of the gate began applying to build facilities and win lucrative deals with BC Hydro. With Bill 30 in place and a totally inadequate environmental assessment process, there has been little to stand in the way of these projects.
This gold rush is of concern because the government isn't looking at the cumulative impacts.
In the case of the Accenture move, the standard argument of cost savings from corporate efficiency, not surprisingly, hasn't panned out.
And this should not be a surprise. If we track the record of Accenture and some of these other privatization deals across this continent, there's case after case after case that there are not cost savings.
Another government-peddled myth is that BC's choice to import some energy is a threat to self-sufficiency.
We're in a bit of a fool's rush. We call it the gold rush here. We've got an artificial crisis being created. We produce enough power for our needs.
The population is told that we're importing energy. Well, we import energy because we can. It's very profitable to us to do that.
Indeed, BC chooses to import a small amount of its energy at bargain rates while selling power back to its neighbors at lucrative spot market prices. Setting aside the fact that BC doesn't actually need to import power today, the government has concocted a false argument that private power is needed to reduce BC's importing of non-green electricity. It has used British Columbians' justifiable concerns over global warming to trade away wilderness for private power. This recent editorial in the Vancouver Sun by respected ecologist Dr. Craig Orr pulled back the green curtain on ecologically destructive private river power. A critique of Dr. Orr's article came the following week in the Sun from one Steve Davis, president of private power lobby, the Independent Power Producers Association of BC, and, as this 2003 document shows, vice president of Ledcor Power, owner of no less than 18 of these private river power licenses. In his article, Davis trumpeted the well-worn and misleading mantra of his industry that private river power is the magical solution to BC's importing of dirty power. While a portion of the small amount of power BC imports doesn't come from green sources, the ecological costs of BC's new energy plan, gravely endangering fish, bears, and other wildlife, clear-cutting carbon-absorbing trees, and destroying valuable ecotourism destinations, make this a trade-off British Columbians and their environment can ill afford. In this time of global warming and shrinking natural resources, maintaining control of water, for life and as a clean energy source, may be the most important challenge facing the people of BC today.
Let's produce clean green energy. That's the way to go. That's the only way to go. But we need to do it right.
Another irony of this new private river power is that it becomes available in spring, the precise time of year when BC needs it least. And the idea that these deals will guarantee long-term energy self-sufficiency for BC is a myth. At the end of these private power deals, which range from 20 to 40 years, BC Hydro no longer has exclusive access to that power. The producer is able to sell it anywhere in North America at whatever the market will bear, and owns the facility and can renew the river license in perpetuity. That's right. The BC government gives away the public's rivers for free and gets them to finance the facilities and commit to purchase the power from them at exorbitant rates. And at the end of that process, the private company owns the river rights and the infrastructure and can sell their power to whomever they want for whatever they want forever. That's the BC Energy Plan in a nutshell.
By 2030, we may be in a desperate situation where we're having our power prices established in California because we're having to meet the California price in order to buy power that's produced on our rivers that are a public asset.
With a several-year head start thanks to government secrecy and hundreds of billions of dollars at stake, it's clear British Columbians face a great challenge to stop the juggernaut of private power. But awareness is building quickly now as ignorance turns to disbelief and disbelief to outrage.
People would say to me, well, I don't believe that. Why would the BC government give away the production of clean green energy to the private sector? And why would they essentially be privatizing streams and rivers? That people just, it didn't make sense. Once people get over that disbelief, the next thing they say is, what can I do to help?
These private water power licenses, ripping them up and getting them off of the rivers would probably be a wonderful way to celebrate the beginning of this century, that we as a collective multicultural society were able to do what they say we couldn't do.
It's not too late for the people of British Columbia to take back their rivers and take back their power. WAC Bennett built the best public power utility in the world by having the courage and vision to make BC's hydro energy public. British Columbians can demand the cancellation of the BC Energy Plan and Accenture contract, reject private power, and maintain exclusive public benefit from historic and future sources of renewable public energy. Join us at www.saveourrivers.ca for more of Power Play, a multi-part series exposing the theft of BC's rivers.